Amid the ongoing standoff with China at the LAC, the Indian government has ruled out any premature withdrawal from the Kailash range. To explain what this means, I have with me Snehesh Alex Philip, who tracks defense and who's done the story for ThePrint. So do log on to our website, theprint.in, to read his story and send questions in this episode of Government Matters. Now, I'm not going to talk any further, Snehesh. Can you just sort of demystify the story you've done today and explain what this really means?
Well, the story is about the fact that top sources in the Indian government, that is in Narendra Modi government, have said that there would be no premature withdrawal from the Kailash range. Now, Kailash range is at the southern banks of Pangong Tso. Viewers, if you remember, on the 29th and on the intervening night of 29th and 30th August, the specialized units of the Indian Army, they outflanked the Chinese and occupied the heights, basically the heights of the Rachangla. And these heights are known as the Kailash range. So they have been occupied since August. Now, China has been demanding that India withdraw from these heights. Chinese contention is that these are Chinese territory and India has illegally entered into Chinese territory. Now, India's contention is of course the fact that this is well within India's line of actual control. Of late there have been reports to suggest that there is a deal that is in the making. As per the deal, and remember that this is actually a Chinese proposal and not an Indian proposal, so which is being discussed. And as per the proposal, the Chinese have finally agreed to move back from finger 4 to beyond finger 8. Earlier, the Chinese had said that they will go to finger 5 in the northern banks, and finger 4 will become a no-go area for both sides, and then India will have to withdraw from the southern banks. Now, Chinese has for the first time agreed to go back beyond finger 8, and then India has to withdraw from the southern banks, which is the heights that we're talking about.
Right.
However, the Chinese are saying that the area between finger 4 to finger 8 will become a no-go area. Now, the Indians are of the view, and hence, there was a lot of speculation that was there that India might actually withdraw from the southern banks. There were articles which came out, saying that, India should not withdraw from the southern banks. I myself had interviewed the former Army Chief General VP Malik, who was of the clear opinion that southern banks is something that we've been able to dominate in August, and it is a huge advantage to us, and we should not let it go off so easily.
Right. So, Snehesh, in your story, you also mentioned that the Indian side is prepared for this to be a long standoff, that this is not likely to end anytime soon, even if there is partial disengagement. So, what is the sense? How long can the standoff last?
See, well, that's a $1 million question as far as how long will this standoff last. But ever since this standoff actually began, the tensions began in early May. We at ThePrint have been reporting that this will be a long-term one. And initially we had said that this could last even until winters.
Right.
Now the winters are here. The troops continue to remain at these forward locations. There are heights which go up to 18,000 feet, temperatures which drop up to minus 40 degrees Celsius. The wind chill is very high. And it is felt that the troops will continue to remain. The Indian Army is already putting into action its summer plans. At the same time, what the government is saying is that even if, the sources are saying, is that even if, let's assume, tomorrow there is a partial withdrawal which happens, or let's say there is a withdrawal which happens, where the Indians also move back, the Chinese also move back. However, it is felt that the tensions will continue to simmer.
Right.
In the sense that the Chinese will always want to, will keep engaging India at the LAC.
So there will be a threat.
There will be a constant threat. And this is also seen from the fact that the Chinese have gone ahead and built huge number of military facilities all along the LAC. And these constructions have been happening for the last 3 years, actually ever since the Doklam crisis of 2017. But even as the current standoff is happening, the Chinese have built huge reserves in its depth. In depth, I mean away from the forward location that they're currently in. which is an indication to the fact that the Chinese will continue to push India.
Right.
And this could actually take place during the summer because the winter becomes difficult. Of course, for the Indians also it is difficult, but for the Chinese it is more difficult because the Chinese are not used to being deployed at these locations.
Right. Well, your story also interestingly mentions that your sources say that China has learned that India is no pushover. On what basis are we saying that?
Well, on the this is not even though I personally believe that it is right.
The government sources
but
saying
the
that.
government sources are saying this, and why they are saying this is because it is felt that when the Chinese first initially moved in May, they never thought India's response would be so fierce. Now, of course, there is no doubt about the fact that the Indian army was caught by surprise. Our intelligence was found wanting, and the assessment, even if the intelligence was there, the assessment that the Chinese could do this was lacking. But now that China had moved in, the response of the Indian forces has been spectacular in terms of the movement that they have undertaken. So as of now, there are about nearly 50,000 troops who have been pumped into Ladakh. The movement of the troops took place not just purely based on army assets, but also the Air Force was involved. You had the Navy and the Air Force also get into action. Now, the Chinese thought that this would be a walkover. There would be a standoff. It was initially expected, and if you've seen, there were statements that actually came out from certain quarters in India also saying that this is a temporary issue, this would be resolved soon. But while they were maintaining all these things, the Indian build-up had already started. So somewhere the Chinese, and in Galwan also, when on June 15 when a clash happened. Now, how did this clash happen? The fact is that Chinese tricked and they built a tent and an observation post near in the Galwan Valley near what is known as the Y Junction. Now, Y Junction is about it's about a few hundred meters away from PP14, which is about 500 meters from the LAC. So let's assume PP14 is the LAC. Indians had, there was a talks that were held in the morning. The Chinese had agreed to withdraw from that location. Despite that, they didn't withdraw. Now, there was a clash which happened, initial clash which happened, in which the tent that was there at Y Junction was burned down by the Indian forces. And then, there was an observation post which was near PP14, which the Indians had gone to dismantle, and then there was a fight that took place. Now, of course, the fact is that there were 20 Indian soldiers, who lost their lives, along with the commanding officer of the 16 Bihar. Now, what has also happened is the fact that the Chinese have also suffered casualties. It's not that the Indians, even though the Chinese were well prepared, the Indians were not expecting this clash to happen. This was something which just happened at the moment.
Right.
However, the Chinese had come in with their spikes, with their clubs, with their sticks, with barbed wires on. The Chinese had come prepared to attack the Indians, to teach Indians a lesson what they thought. However, the fact is that the Chinese did suffer casualties. Now, China has officially not accepted the number of casualties that it has taken. The Chinese media has reported on the fact that they have received casualties. Now, following one of the talks, the Chinese authority at the military level, the Chinese authorities had informed the Indian side that they've lost one commanding officer, and if I'm not mistaken, total of 5 casualties is what the Chinese told the Indian side. Now, if the Chinese are saying 5, you can obviously guess what the actual casualties on the Chinese side would be.
Right.
So based on which, the fact that the Chinese have been forced to get deployed during the winters at such harsh hostile terrain that they're not used to is the fact that the Chinese have also learned that India is not a pushover.
All right. Okay, so let me move to audience questions. Pratyush Sinha, will concentrating too much of our resources on the LAC and that too in Ladakh leave LOC vulnerable? How much? Okay, actually first answer just this. Move on to. This is the question you're often asked in government matters, in fact.
Well, not really. If you're asking if the heavy deployment at the LAC will have any effect on the LOC, well, no, that's not the case. it will have no effect. Actually, the fact is that none of the LOC troops have been deployed, have been moved from LOC to LAC. However, yes, we have one RR battalion that has actually moved to Ladakh. But the fact is that the Indian Army is a 13 point, it's a 1.3 to 1.4 million strong army. So it has enough of men to be deployed at the LAC and also to take care of the line of control.
Right. Okay, Mahavir Mangrola, how do India and China's winter equipment compare? So how well placed are both India and China to deal with this harsh winter?
Well, see, India has enough experience of being deployed in situations like this, in terrains and climate like this. For example, we have an entire brigade which looks after the Siachen thing. So there is a constant round-the-clock deployment at Siachen which is there. So the Indians are already aware of there is an infrastructure that is in place. However, the fact is that this standoff and the deployment of such large number of men was not anticipated in the eastern Ladakh sector along the LAC. So of course there would be teething troubles. The Indian Army has gone ahead and has built a number of smart camps, smart structures at the LAC to accommodate the troops. You have high altitude clothing that has been given to the soldiers who are deployed there. Of course, the fact is that this clothing came in from abroad, from the US basically. At the same time, they've also put up a number of tents, Arctic tents, in Ladakh. So there is multiple infrastructure that has been put in place. However, while we agree that there is deployment, the fact is that things on the ground are not so comfortable. For example,
in fact, if I can interrupt you, Snesh, because the next question is related to this. Let me just ask so that you can put both of them together. This is from Kaushik Mishra. What are the living conditions and posts on top of these Kailash range positions? We know that army has set up heated camps, but what are the facilities and forward posts and how are soldiers rotated? So because it's related, I think it's best for you to
So of course, as I said, the army has gone ahead and have constructed a number of smart camps, as they call it. These are heated accommodations. They have beds. They have hot water facilities that are there. Food, the ration for the next 6 months have been catered for. So there's infrastructure that is available. But remember that the soldier, when he's posted in such a situation, it's not a peace situation. So you have a situation where the enemy is really staring at you. So the soldiers would not be spending time inside these tents. They would be coming to these tents to rest. However, the deployment would be outside. They will have to do certain kind of patrolling that will have to happen. So the situation is going to be, the situation is tough. Even though the infrastructure is in place, there would continue to be teething troubles that would be there. However, the fact is that, as I earlier said, the Indians are already used to being deployed in more extreme conditions.
Harsher
winter conditions. Now, for the Chinese, it's exactly the opposite. Of course, you have the fact that the Chinese have, there is a lot of propaganda videos that has been put out by Chinese handles, Global Times, which shows heated accommodation and things like that. But what you see on the ground is the fact that the Chinese are having a faster rotation of troops.
Right.
A faster rotation of troops means that the Chinese soldiers are not able to keep up with the conditions. Along with that, the fact is that the Indians have pictures, videos of number of winter casualties taking place on the Chinese side. However, that does not mean Indians are not facing any winter casualties. Indians are of course facing winter casualties. But this is the first time that the Chinese have been deployed in such a terrain, so it would be naturally be difficult for them. So that is why when the winters were coming near, the Chinese were involved in negotiations and wanted a quick disengagement. However, the Indians stuck to the stand that if they have to withdraw from the southern banks where they have an upper edge over the Chinese, the disengagement has to happen at multiple locations and not just at the locations where the Chinese want.
Okay, so it seems that while we discuss this here, our viewers are engaged in some kind of a heated argument among themselves. So there is a debate going on in the form of comments. So maybe you can sort of later go and weigh in a little bit. In fact, there's a viewer who says Nesh Alex Phillip is the best reporter at The Print. Please increase his salary and call him more often. Now, increasing your salary is above my pay grade, and I don't think I can call you more often in Government Matters because you're the most frequent guest at Government Matters. But this is a visitor called AA. I'm not sure if you have anonymously left that comment yourself, Snehesh. All right. So
not me.
there is a question by Sanjay Sinha. Is there any trust level left in India-China? So, after so many rounds of first military level, then military and diplomatic level talks, are we looking at any sort of is there such a trust deficit that talks can't quite resolve this?
Well, of course, there is a trust deficit that is there. There is an immense trust deficit. Not just, when the Chinese moved in May, remember that, you had summit level, summit meetings between the leadership of the two countries. In February, for that matter, the then Northern Army commander actually had visited the Chinese. A year ago, the Chinese, military members of the Chinese Military Commission had visited India. They were taken to a number of locations. So there was a bonhomie kind of a thing that was there. Even though, the border was not settled, yet, there was a talk of the Wuhan spirit of ensuring that there is peace there at the border. So when the Chinese moved in May, that came as a huge surprise.
Right.
So the first trust was broken then. The second trust was, and this was the big one, was broken in June when the Chinese engaged in a very barbaric attack on the Indians, which led to the death of 20 Indian soldiers. Now, what this has essentially done, this incident, even though India gave it back to them, what this has essentially done is the fact that it has broken the trust factor between the two sides. Now, I would actually, I don't know if Shekhar Gupta, our editor in chief, had mentioned this in one of his video or not, but while I was chatting with him, he mentioned about the fact when initially it began, he said, China has brought back memories of the 1962 war. The trust factor that was missing, or so whatever has been achieved since 1962, China has ensured that everything actually goes back
right.
To 1962 and brings back the memories of 1962.
So that's the level of trust we've regressed to.
Absolutely, and that because of China.
Right. Ashish Chawla, is there a possibility of further India-China standoffs in Bhutan, Arunachal, Uttarakhand and Ladakh? How grim could the situation be next summer? And there is another related question, which is from Devesh Sharma. Can the Chinese afford to keep multiple fronts open?
Well, the fear that that the initial question first mentioned is something that I had expressed earlier in this show, in which I said the fear is that the Chinese will come back in larger numbers and a much more fiercer manner in the summers. As far as the locations and other locations that you mentioned, for example, in the east, you forgot to mention the central sector. The fact is that has been the fear, and that is why you have the Indian Army on operational alert all along the LAC, not just in eastern Ladakh, but all along the LAC, the central sector as well as the eastern sector. And you also have the Air Force and the Navy who are on complete full operational alert. For example, in the Navy, of course, you're aware of the fact that as far as the Air Force is concerned, the Air Force has pumped in huge number of assets into the northern sector. You have multiple fighters which have come in from various parts of the country and are deployed in various bases in the north. They are carrying out the combat air patrol. You have the Navy, nearly 100% of the Eastern and the Western Naval Command are out at sea, and this also involves the aircraft carrier, the submarines, the frigates, the destroyers and everything. So the fear factor is there, and that is why India has taken these steps.
All right, I'll take a couple of last questions. This is from Shantanu Bagchi. My question is, what in your opinion will be the end game? Why did China even attempt this when in hindsight this act of theirs looks like a blunder?
Well, that's another $1 million question that you've asked, and I can only guess what was China's intent. I'll tell you why, because this is one question that I've been asking to everyone that I meet or everyone that I speak to. be it from the diplomatic front, be it in the army, the air force, or the navy, or for that matter, the security establishment. And somehow I've not been able to get one firm answer. But the fact is that this has to be taken in the larger context of what China has been doing in its neighborhood. For example, China's issues, how China has been reacting in the South China Sea over the last year, how China has been reacting to the whole Hong Kong issue, which has raised eyebrows all across the world, how China is taking on the US and wanting to establish itself as a global power. So among all this, I think what China essentially did, there were two things. One, China, wanted to show itself as the major power in Asia, and
as the alpha.
As the alpha, and increase its standing in the US, because had India withdrawn from this fight, then China would have naturally emerged as the alpha. Now the other thing is the fact that the Chinese were indeed perturbed by the heavy, the fast-paced construction that was happening in the Ladakh sector in terms of border infrastructure. Now, of course, the fact is that, for example, many talk about this DSDBO road, which is a very crucial road. But the fact is that, while the pace increased, this construction started in the UPA government. Now, initially, of course, building fresh road was difficult. There were a number of things that were tried. However, once a certain section was made, the Modi government came into power. They were able to, bring in new systems into the DRDO, that is, into the Border Roads Organization, the BRO, and new equipments were bought. The budget was increased. So there was a lot of fast-paced construction activity, which irked China, because China, while it has built roads, bridges on its side of the LAC, they were happy with the fact that the Indians had not built any infrastructure on its side near the LAC. Along with this is the fact that you had statements, of course, also you'll have to remember that the China's big multi-billion-dollar investment in CPEC, which is that they would want to ensure that this particular area in eastern Ladakh is completely secured. As far as the Aksai Chin is concerned, and along with the fact that there were statements that were made by the Home Minister Amit Shah in the Parliament, which he said that Aksai Chin continues to be a part of the Indian territory. So, from a Chinese perspective, you take these statements, you take the situations on the ground into control, where India is building at very fast pace. You somehow have this doubt. So, somewhat Xi Jinping probably thought, fine, India is acting too funny. Let's now put India in its place and showcase to the world how powerful China really is.
All right, very quickly, because this was the first question that came and I somehow seem to have missed it, so my apologies. Dev Verma, does the logistics agreement with the USA mean that India has to worry less or not at all about the resources required by the army stationed at the LAC?
About the resource, see, as far as the logistics agreement with this US is concerned, for example, I earlier mentioned about the fact that we've procured high altitude clothing from abroad, and this was from the US, and this came actually through the logistics agreement. But when you're preparing for a war, when you're fighting for a war, and rightly so, the Indian Army is doing the same, is the fact that you're thinking of fighting the war on your own capability, not depending on any third country, for that matter, the US, the French, or anybody else, to actually step in. So you fight war on your own capability and capacity and on your own terms.
Right. Okay. Very quickly, Snesh, so in your story you mentioned that the message given out to the Indian Army, to the forces at the LAC is Shaurya and Sanyam, which is courage and restraint. So just tell us very quickly a little more about that.
Well, this was of course in conversation with a source, and my question to the person was, what is the direction that the government has given out. So and it was mentioned that Shaurya in English, if you translate it, can actually mean bravery, it can mean courage, gallantry. So Shaurya, as far as the armed forces are concerned, because they have to be deployed, they are taking on China, and they have shown the courage, is what the person was saying. and Sanyam means restraint. So restraint in speaking, for example, and this was actually a message not just to the armed forces but also to other people in the government. You didn't want ministers or ruling
Shooting
party
off their
MPs to come and shoot their mouth off on a sensitive issue as China, because there is no denying about the fact that, and as the story says, and this was a good this was something that was told by the source, in which there's no denying of the fact that China has a bigger military, and there's also not denying of the fact that India is not looking at war. India is wanting peace. But if something is forced upon India, India will also not reserve its punches, will throw in its punches.
Right.
So yes, so there has to be a restraint as far as the political class and the leadership is concerned, in being measured in what they speak out on this sensitive issue. And courage, of course, the fact that the forces are there in this weather, in this time of the day, they continue to be deployed there in close contact with the enemy.
Right. All right. This has been one of the longer episodes of Government Matters. So thank you, Snehesh, for being patient, and thank you for sending in your questions. Keep subscribing to our YouTube channel, follow us on Twitter, like our Facebook page, and visit our website, theprint.in.